Welcome to Three Questions with Motion Point. I'm your host, Dominic Ditterbeid, and I have the absolute pleasure of being with Charles Lesperance, CEO of OXO Translations. OXO Translations is a Montreal-based translation company that uses its in-house team of more than 40 professional translators and their vast network of dedicated, hardworking linguists to help their customers and clients translate content for global markets as well as the French-Canadian market. Charles, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. What about you, Dominic? I'm happy
I'm
to be
doing
here
good.
with you. And
I'm doing great too. I'm happy to be here with you too, and I appreciate you hopping on. So I don't know if you want to add a little bit more context to OXO Translations and the presentation of you.
sure. So I'm the CEO and founder of OXO Translation. As you said, we are Montreal based. We are about 100 employees. 75% of our workforce and our employees are based in Montreal, Quebec, where I'm currently. And I founded the company 10 years ago. We are specialized in multiple verticals, but overall, we're here to promote as well the quality of the translations in the Canadian market, and hopefully we can grow the business in the next years.
Awesome. Well, of course you will, and I think it's very interesting the timing of our conversation because today we wanted to talk a little bit about Bill 96 and the impact that Bill 96 has had in terms of localization efforts within Canada. And Charles, I mean your last name Lesperance, right? Are you French Canadian yourself? Are you from the Quebecan area?
Yes, born and raised in Montreal, Quebec.
Yeah.
My first language, as you can probably hear, is French. So I went to school in French, like more than I think 60 or 70% of the Montrealers, and even more that in Quebec, our first language is French.
Yeah, I mean, and so this is a topic that's very close to you that you've lived, that you've experienced. So, I mean, Bill 96 is just a reflection, right, of what society and what Canadians think about French Canadian as part of their culture and their
Mhm.
heritage and the way business and society has to operate within the context of their citizens and in those languages, right? So tell us, like, what has been the impact of Bill 96 that you've been seeing, not only at a personal level, right, but also for OXO Translations in the
Mhm.
past few months.
So basically, what Bill 96 aim at is to preserve the French language in Quebec, and we have the almost same law for the Canadian at the Canada level as well. So the goal is that to make sure that um, the consumers can read and understand the message that the brands are trying to convey. So everything, so the base that everything must be in translated or written into French. So
Hmm.
employment contract, terms of conditions, marketing material for the companies. We had a law before, Loi 101, that had similar expectations for companies, but Bill 96 make it even broader.
Hmm.
So every company that with more than 25 employees will need to have all its material into French. So as you can
Yeah,
imagine, it really increased the volume for French Canadian
that's a lot of
because
people.
that's a lot of companies, that's a lot of people. Yes, so so it put up we can say obligation for the companies to have the material ready into French. And if a company doesn't want to do this, there is stricter measures to ensure that companies comply with this law. So, but the government knew that for some companies, let's say telecoms, banks, transport companies, you can imagine with 100,000 employees, there's a lot of material that is not in French already. So they
Hmm.
give more time to do it. It's not like tomorrow you need to have everything ready. They
Yeah.
understand that there's thousands of documents to be translated. So they give time, and we can advise our clients on what kind of documents needs to be in French first, and we can schedule the documents as the delivery of translations in that sense.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it probably is in the company's best interest to accelerate how fast they translate, right? Because at the end of the day, the fact that Bill 96 exists is because people want to read in French and have information in French. So, specifically, what are some of the key benefits that companies would gain by embracing this localization? Because even though that it's a law and there's a regulation behind it, there's still like a consequence that's positive for businesses that translate, right? They would get more engagement from the French Canadian market. You gain more authority, reliability from your target customers, etc. So, what do you think about that?
Totally. So I would divide because around 75% of our revenues is into French. We're really into that
Hmm.
market.
Hmm.
So if we talk more specifically into this kind of English to French Canadian translation, um, the we more and more companies understand that because around 25-30% of the Canadians speak French primarily, you need to address, even though we are bilingual or more or less bilingual, we understand that it's very important for us because where we come from to have the message written almost like if it's written in French.
Right.
So you want to sell shoes, you need to have really, really like the message, the tagline. It's trust creation, what
Right. I
consumers
was about to
expect.
say.
Um, as well. So for them, it's core to the marketing functions. We often work hand in hand with the marketing teams to come with slogans that are really, really sounds native. So it goes
Yeah.
beyond translation, and I think brands now really understand the need for that, and there have been cases where brands didn't take localization seriously, and it backlash. You can have we won't name companies there, but there was big backlash
Yeah.
around some campaigns that were too literal, and probably it's because LSP were not involved at first. You have a marketing person that can speak French or understand. You use machine translation, and sometimes without context, it could be tricky. So I think LSPs have this um, really understanding, experience, capacities to work hand in hand with the clients that want to be present in this market. And
Yeah.
overall, if you go a bit beyond French Canadian, because most of us companies we translate into multiple languages, this expectations of quality is present for or the German translation, Spanish, because they have this experience with French Canadian translations, and especially so high, so they apply that similarly to all the other languages that we do.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think in Canada we can be considered like the Swiss chocolate, and that we the high end. This is, I think,
Yeah.
for all the LSPs in Canada, we are viewed as high end LSPs. And yes, so I think this is a bit where the market is currently in Canada and how we help different organizations in there.
Yeah. It's specifically in Canada. I think what's very funny, Charles, is how sometimes when when you're somebody that knows another language, and we were talking about this earlier, how I speak Spanish, born and raised in Mexico. You were born and raised, in Quebec, Canada, speaking French Canadian. Sometimes when we see a translation and it's not transcreated or really you can tell the original marketing was in English because you know a little bit of English, there's still that taste of
Mm.
insincerity, I guess, that might come up, or you might think about, oh, well, this wasn't designed for me,
Hmm.
and I think it's very curious because a lot of times companies think about translation for global markets,
Hmm.
but actually, where translation quality can be perceived the easiest is when you translate content for secondary markets within your main market. So let's say Canada
Mm.
has a lot of speakers. One of the secondary markets within that, or maybe not secondary, but sub markets or subpopulations within that,
Small
are
niche,
French
yeah.
Canadian speakers. But they speak a lot of English too. So when they are witnessing the translations made for them, they have a different sense of translation quality, and that happens a lot in the United States of America for Spanish translations. And it's interesting because a lot of Spanish translations
Hmm.
are very hard to interpret because you got people from all over the world and all over, South America, Europe, that have different like flavors of Spanish. So you get a lot of,
Totally,
let's say a
totally.
possibility of, entropy or just a little bit of discussion and disagreement on translation quality, which at the end is always going to be very subjective to the reader. So French Canadian specifically is an example of a language that translation quality really matters and is going to be easily recognized by the end user. And I think that's just interesting, because it's different than the global market translation when you
Yeah.
translate for a secondary market.
Totally. It goes a bit with the buy local. I mean, even if you're a global company, I think consumers want to feel that you're there. It's not just, okay, you
Yeah,
translate and then you buy the product. It's that you are in the market, you
that
understand the
made it for
consumers.
them.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So we really
Well,
live that
what
every
what
day.
about?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well, I was just going to go on to our last question here. Is I don't know, can you share a success story, maybe a case study that highlights how, for example, maybe OXO translations helped somebody specifically and how it impacted their business growth specifically again for Canada and French Canadian market?
Yes, totally. So one example that I find really can illustrate that is we're working with global coffee brand, really with a big presence in Canada. And we're working really hand in hand with our marketing team to come with concepts as well. So, for example, this company has special program or for holidays, for example. So
Hmm.
for Canada Day, they will have a promotion with maybe a special menu and a lot of branding around that. So come celebrate Canada Day. And in Quebec, Canada Day is important, but the most important or celebrated event is Quebec Day, which is
Hmm.
la Fête Saint-Jean. So it's 1 week before Canada Day. So we came with their marketing team and an in-house team as well with a concept that will have actually a menu into uh, French for that day with different branding as well. So
Hmm.
it's localization, I think 3.0 or something, but really like you
Yeah,
need to come with a
excellent. Yeah.
concept because if it's only Canada Day, okay, you're gonna have some people show up. But if it's really localized
Inclusive of
for this
Quebec,
special
right?
thing,
Yeah.
it will work. And probably they sold a lot of food that day, and it's all these little things I think that make brands here in Quebec succeed. Is it's the little thing that's the consumer is going to say, wow, they have a team in Quebec of marketing, and so we can advise their clients on this. I think most of us in LSPs are in Canada are playing that role as well. Is
Mhm.
it unique? I don't know, but this is one example I found.
Well, thank you, Charles. So I appreciate your time. That does it for three questions with Motion Point, and I hope to see you again and to have you again, Charles. But appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Until next
Dominic. It
time.
was a pleasure.